are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again, and man, today in this episode, we're going to be joined by Danielle Sady, and she is a business consultant, a coach with over 20 years of experience in sales, operations, marketing, and project management across various industries. Danielle, man, she is going to help us understand about her business, but also entrepreneurship and the transition from corporate to entrepreneurship. So, man, Danielle, how are you doing today?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Man, appreciate you being on, taking time, talking to us. And you have a success story. You have been able to launch 2 successful e-commerce and startups. So with that, kind of tell the audience a little bit about your transition from corporate world to the entrepreneurship world.
Yeah. Well, it was an interesting journey, and it's funny because I think I had a bit of a disillusion, to be honest, coming across from that business world with so many years experience across these amazing brands that I worked in, that I really thought that it was going to be super simple when I came up with the idea for the first brand, thinking, here I am, I've been around all these different types of retailers and looking at wholesale and retail businesses in, so many categories, and thought, yeah, I'm going to know exactly what I'm doing here. And to be honest, it was probably one of the biggest shocks I think I've ever had in my life in my working career, because there was so much I didn't actually know. So it was such a growth era for me with that transition. I mean, that was about 7 years ago when I moved across to starting the first e-com brand. And, the truth is, you just don't know what you don't know. And sometimes you don't even know the questions you need to ask when you're making that transition to entrepreneurship. And I think that was probably my biggest wake-up call.
And when you started the process of building your brand, what was that decision like for you as far as how you're going to prioritize basically how you build yourself from scratch?
So for me, I started with the product. The idea really hit me first. So after really bad shopping experiences and not being able to find, for me, it was underwear that was comfortable, that I could wear every day. Some days I was working all day within the corporate jobs and then had entertaining to do that night. So I could be at work for 16 hours, 12 hours really easily in a day. And then other days I wanted to leave the office and then go out and go to the gym or whatever it was. So for me, it was a pain point that started. So it started for me with product. I saw the gap in the marketplace that was sitting there, and that was where it started. And from there, I started building out, what did it look like? What did it feel like for me to be able to have this product? And then research was my next biggest thing. The research of what was happening within my community. And then when I realized it wasn't just, for example, with this product, curvier women who were struggling with heights and different things to do with underwear, it was actually across the board. And so I kept extending that reach to gain as much knowledge as I could, because that was one thing I really loved doing is, getting information and understanding, because the numbers don't lie, nor do facts. You know what I mean? Like when you actually have conversations with people, we can assume something. But I started with building out what it looked like as a product, who it was serving. And at that point, I don't think I even realized that I was doing my target market or my customer avatars were being built at that early phase in it. So product, and then I was building about the customers, and then it was, okay, so who is the brand speaking to? How is that then going to happen? And initially I thought I had the answers to that, and I was very blessed to have the opportunity to meet with someone via someone else I knew who I'd been my sounding board in this transition, and was lucky enough to meet a very successful entrepreneur who had been not only in my category, but so many other brands he had been at the helm of starting up and moving through. And he really went over the whole process with me to have a look at where my strengths lied and where I probably didn't have the knowledge or experience or expertise. And it really explained that I didn't have to be the expert in every single part of my business. I had to have understanding, but I could get other people in. So then I went and started chatting to brand strategists. So they were helping me with, it's great. I had this cute little name and a cute little logo that I got someone to do. But the truth was it didn't resonate back to what the product was. It didn't give a clear understanding. It didn't show the offering properly. And I started to understand the whole concept behind branding and what that entailed. It wasn't just a logo. It was the fonts. It was the colors. It was all of that encompassed together to really form something that would have a visual reference in this digital age that could represent this product that I was looking at.
We're talking to Danielle Sady, and you can go visit her website, daniellesady.com. I mean, people can check out your website and tell you're very passionate about everything you're saying right now because, I mean, it's clean. The colors that you chose, I believe it flows very well with your layout. And you can just tell you know what you're doing. What was it like? What was the process like getting your brand, presentation nice and clear and professional?
I think getting that brand strategist in and working with them whilst I let them go in their zone of genius, I asked questions. So then as I came into the consulting side, which I kind of fell into just by people calling me, seeing what I've done with the 2 e-com brands, that it then led into this, building this consulting side and coaching side within me. And I think it was, I was really clear. I know who I am. So like you said, my brand colors on my daniellesady.com site are definitely quite visually appealing. They're quite colorful. It's not a black and white monotone site because that's my personality. And one thing I'm really sure about with building this part of my brand is that people needed to almost get a piece of me when they jump on. They need to see that if you want someone who is very black and white and monotoned, that's not really who I am. My personality is a vibrant one, and that's how I coach. I coach with all of my passion behind it. And there was no difference when I was writing my book that's coming out at the end of April 2023. And it's, writing Once Upon a Startup it has all of that, that feistiness, that passion all in there, because going down this journey, I just saw some people wouldn't have the resources, the network, everything I had. So I knew when I was doing the next phase of where I was going in my career that I needed other people to have something that they could, almost see themselves in, whether it's through, the language I'm using or whatever. But I really wanted to ensure that people could see that as much as, some days can be tough when you head down this road, I want them to feel positive and vibrant and alive when they're doing it, because the passion is such a big part of it.
And when you look at the success you have so far, we kind of touched on this earlier in the show about your experience in sales and marketing and product management. How you believe that kind of prepared you to kind of just be a step ahead when you launch your own business?
100%. So I think every role I've had, I can actually pinpoint to something I've done throughout my e-commerce and now my consulting and coaching journey. I am so grateful to every role. So if, talking about how they tie together, when I was in the bedding and furniture industry, I learned about fabrics from, the top panel that goes on a bed. And that then came into play when I was picking fabrics that went on the underwear line. or understanding how to create a pricing book and what that looked like so I could wholesale and retail. So that came more from one of the other businesses I worked with. Then the financial side of it, understanding how to read a P&L and looking through it, what the difference is between a balance sheet and a P&L, that came from another business that, was operating. So every single role collectively has offered me something. And I'm a firm believer. I don't know, depending who of your listeners truly believe everything happens for a reason. I'm one of those people. So all of those roles came into my world for a reason, and have made me grow as a human being in my career. And they've all attributed to where I am today. That's just, 3 examples, though, that I've been able to showcase there. But every single one of them has offered me something.
And with most, if not all entrepreneurs, there's always some kind of challenge down the road. So when you're working with your clients, when it comes to funding, when it comes to marketing and knowing their competition in their respective industry, what are some of the things that you try to do to help them overcome those things?
I think the biggest thing I have seen with the clients I work with is mindset is such a huge part of it. And it's one of the reasons actually within the book that I've done a mindset sort of check questionnaire at the end of every chapter, because if the saying, if you cook with love, people always talk about how amazing the food tastes, when you cook with love and doing that. Your business is no different. And those days when you come in and you feel like just everything's against you, sometimes it's a matter of just talking it through to put it in perspective. And when it's us where we're going through everything, some days you just can't see that. And this is where I have to say, I think it would be the most rewarding part of coaching and consulting, that I get the opportunity to let people sit there and go, bah, 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 this is everything that's going on. And then we go, okay, so what are you in control of? And what are you allowing to control you right now? And just putting it into that perspective and seeing the mind shift change in that instance. And even, letting people know it's okay to some days want to give up and walk away. And it's how you pick yourself up and dust yourself off in those moments for tomorrow that make the biggest change in your business.
We're talking to Danielle Sady, and she has an awesome website you can check out. Is daniellesady.com. Can't miss that one, right? And when you look at team building, and when people are looking at talent acquisition, what's some of the key qualities that you try to help people to look for when they're building their team?
Team building definitely comes back to you understanding your vision and the values of the business. So it's all great if someone's got, the skill set on paper, but when you meet, do you really gel with that person? Because they've got to uphold the values that you do within the business and believe in them to really have that great culture fit. Because if your culture's not great, that's coming from you as a leader. With whatever actions you take is always going to filter down, right, into your team. The other part of it is understanding and living by those values that you set within your brand. So if you're about, customer satisfaction, if you're, about generosity, freedom, whatever the values may be of that brand, first of all, if you don't know the values of your brand, you need to go back and start there and figure out what they are, because you have to be clear and you have to ascertain how they connect with what you do each day. Because if you've got, the values, like I said, as an example, and, the customer satisfaction or something is one of them, and you're sitting here overrunning your team, that they can't offer that generosity or integrity to your clients, but then you expect them to be happy, but you've got them, for example, overbooked. Like I've seen one client that I've worked with recently who's overbooking their team, about rather than letting them run at 100%, they're expecting them to run at 125% every single day. And that's coming from their leader. And what's happening is it's destroying the culture. The team are upset because they don't feel like they're offering the clients who have done exactly what was needed, and booked in and got all these things sorted, because they're rushing them through because the boss has made some decisions that aren't great.
Man, that's important to notice. And how can, because you mentioned how the person kind of almost like Michael Jackson, got to look himself in the mirror in order to make that change. How important is it for them to really take that seriously as far as jumping on that quickly versus, oh, we'll just say that for later. We'll just make it what we have right now.
I probably would say ego can come into play with that a little bit. And that's normally when people go, oh, we'll deal with it later. Because they don't, exactly like you just said, they don't want to look in the mirror. And we really do have to have that self-reflection, self-awareness, and self-honesty. And it doesn't mean you have to go and tell someone else, where you might be falling short, but taking that ownership of it, and that's removing ego. A lot of the time we can get caught up and go, oh, but, so-and-so did this and so-and-so did that. But we can also have a look at our part in that, because there's a learning in there for us. Just because someone did the wrong thing based upon instructions you gave, can you have a look at, what instructions you gave? Were they clear enough? Had we given them enough detail? Had we set them up with the right parameters? Had we given them the right freedoms? Have we empowered them enough? So, yeah, it's super important. And the difference in the people who are going to make cut through with their team, with their business, are the ones who aren't afraid to do the work on self 100% and leave their ego at the door.
When you look at metrics that entrepreneurs should track in launching and scaling their business, how can they be used to inform decision making?
So it depends whether you're talking. So when you're starting out, you have to have a guide of somewhere you want to be. The first thing you need to do, though, is figure out, when you're starting out, the first matrix you need to work on is what your break even is. What is it costing you to run your business every single day? Even down to what it costs you per hour, to figure out what return you need to get to cover your costs. And then from there, you'll have, depending on the industry, it's so different, right? So I work for a business running their coaching team for a few days a week. And, in that industry, there's like 16 metrics that are prevalent to that industry for people who are up and running. But then for someone starting out, yes, you would look at those metrics, but there would be other things as you're commencing, because you're in the scaling phase. So scaling or starting versus mature business, the metrics are all going to be very different. So you have to understand what your key triggers are. You also need to know, this is where you're starting, right? So this is your reality. What's the goal you're striving to do? Is it that you want to have a full-time wage coming from this role? What is that full-time wage? Because you need to be really specific. So if that's, say you want to pay yourself $80K a year, and your business is brand new, and for the first 3 months, you're not going to be able to pay yourself, or you're going to pay yourself very minimal. So you need to factor that into what your sales are, whether it's a service or product-based business. You need to factor that in, so it's building to that, and you have to have milestone check-in. So you look at it as a larger picture first, right? Because our job as CEOs, as business owners, as entrepreneurs is a vision. So the vision has to be really clear, and that comes down to specific targets you have and putting a number on it. So then you can measure the different results and match them to where you're going to. Because if you don't know where you're going, it's really going to be a mess.
That is true. uh, like someone would say, you don't pay attention, you just end up anywhere on the map. So you gotta find your target and aim. So yeah, I appreciate you saying that.
100%. Yeah.
When you look at what are some of the mistakes that you've made along the way as an entrepreneur, how have you learned from those mistakes and use it as motivation to go to the next level?
Well, mistakes would be a whole nother session of your podcast, to be honest. There's been so many of them because I'll come back to one of the first things I said. I actually didn't know the questions I needed the answers to, so I didn't know what question to ask. So some of the biggest things is, one, I had a really bad bookkeeper. Oh my gosh, did that hurt me? That hurt my business because not having a bookkeeper. So I went to someone who I believe was a specialist right at the start, and they set it all up. I believed everything they said. I ran off it. Well, it turns out my books for the first number of months were actually fiction because it wasn't taking inventory asset out as each sale invoice came in. It was just a whole messed up thing. So number one lesson for me was the importance of a bookkeeper in your financial team. It's not just about, and you could be really small or you could be massive. That financial team allows you then to have a solid understanding of what your physical footprint is when it comes to your financials, which then allows you to make solid financial decisions. It's also speaking to people who are specialists in what they do. I learned I had not factored in when one of my businesses launched, a 6% PayPal or Afterpay, ZipPay, whatever, the 6% fee, the merchant fee that was going in. So I was selling product, allowing wholesale customers in the first couple of months to pay for it however they chose on my website. And I was losing 6% on every one of those sales when they were already getting discounted goods. So that was an expensive exercise as well, or lesson. And again, with all of this, though, what it drives me to do, because they're not all financial, but they're two big ones, right? And the reason I give you the financial ones is because the impact is real in your pocket, especially when you're self-funded. It's really freaking hurts to watch what you'd worked for just go in a heartbeat, right? And normally when you talk financial, people feel the impact more because they can physically see it. But yeah, what both of those lessons did was once I did them once, I learned from them. I acknowledged them. I went, okay, where do I need to go to get the education to lift myself up to the next level? Where do I need to go to read more information? Like, we've got the World Wide Web at our fingertips 24/7. We can learn as much as we want. It's your choice whether you choose to take the lessons that come up. Again, letting ego step in and go and watch Netflix instead, or you sit there and go, holy moly, Batman, this has just hit me. I'm going to sit here and spend the next hour or 2 hours when I could be watching Netflix and learning about this so I get at least even the questions I need to ask the professionals and the people who live in that genius zone. So that's where I went. And sometimes those people cost you more money, but boy, are they worth it than sometimes the cheaper alternatives that are out there.
Once again, talking to Danielle Sady, and you can go visit her website, daniellesady.com. When you're working with your clients, especially those who might be new, very new to entrepreneurship, what are some common misconceptions that new entrepreneurs might assume exist versus the reality?
One, that it's going to be fun. It's not always fun. That it's going to be hard work. Sometimes people forget how much it's going to be, especially with newer ones starting out who may be still working full time. So, you have to remind, my favorite saying to my clients is, don't try and eat the whole elephant in one sitting. It's one piece at a time. And on the days when it feels too much and your body's telling you, like, I'm a very firm believer in listening to my body and being self-aware enough to know that when I need to step back, I need to step back for a reason. And it could be that I spend, half a day hanging out with the family on the couch or something, or just doing something I wouldn't normally do, or reading a book that day and just having some Danielle time. But we need to listen to ourselves, and slow and steady wins a race. And one of the biggest things is the comparison to others. It will be the biggest joy killer you will have when you're starting out. Because a lot of the time you could be comparing to a brand that's been around for 7 years, but only in the spotlight for 1 year. But you're like, oh, look how quickly, they scaled, and look at them, and I want to be like them. Yeah, but you guys don't see that they were exactly like you 7 years ago, and they've gone through this part too. And everyone's journey is so different that yours needs to be about you. And if you don't love it, don't do it. If money's the only driver that you're coming in and starting out with, walk away now, because you need to have more than that. The money is not, the thought of money will never get you through. It has to be true passion, like from your heart of hearts.
And with passion, speaking of passion, because that's one part of the equation. But for some entrepreneurs, they really struggle with how much they want to charge their clients. So when someone comes to you for coaching, what's some of the things you try to approach price strategy and revenue optimization for your clients? Yeah. And what are some of the key factors that you take account?
So that's a great question. So again, depends on the industry. But one of the biggest things, and I do talk about the pricing strategy in Once Upon a Startup, because you do want to see kind of what's happening out there in that, people call it competitors. I say, landscape or, market analysis for similar products. You do want to see what's out there, but again, you've got to charge your worth, and you've got to see what it is. So sometimes, if it's a service-based business, there is no right or wrong. It's what you believe your worth or your value is. How much did your education cost, for example? So if you've gone through and you've spent 20 years, for example, a lawyer, you've spent all this time getting your education, the value is in the fact that people have to come to you because you actually understand the law, right? It's no different with everything else that we do. You have become an industry specialist, and the biggest blocker you will have within that is yourself. So sometimes money and mindset blocks come into play there as well. So you need to have a look at what it is that you're scared about and where you sit. And, even for me, I had that when I was heading across into the consulting space. So I understand where my clients sit with it. And I did some work with a money mindset coach to kind of free me of that. But you need to look at the landscape. You need to have a look at yourself again. Like, as you can see, there's a common thread with all of this stuff, that it does come back to the owner. Every single step of this, as much as you may not be the person actively doing every single step, you play a part in it and can, halt something very quickly, change evolution in our business, or you can actually be the one that drives it. So look at your industry. See what's happening around the landscape, see what your value is, right? Because people are paying for value. If you are going to offer exactly the same thing down the road as someone else, how do you stand out? Because if you're going to offer exactly the same, but, potentially minus a couple of things, and you're going to advertise it that way to your customers, they're going to look and potentially price shop. Now, a customer who price shops as well may not be your customer. Know that when you set your price, if people aren't buying from you or booking you, whatever it may be, it doesn't mean you're overpriced all the time. It could be that they're just not your customer.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Man, time flies when you're just having a good time. So when people go visit your website, daniellesady.com, and they're ready to book for you, or during preparations that they need to have, in place before they contact you?
Yeah, so it's really about them giving me some insight. So one of the things, you can't just book a consult session. So what I get you to do is submit an inquiry form, because just as we've said, which is probably a good point to end on, not everyone's the right client for me, and I'm not the right coach or consultant for every single person either. So what I do is I just get clients to fill in an inquiry form, which allows me then to connect on like a 20-minute Zoom, just so we can chat and get the feelers out, because I want to understand where they're at in the business and see if I'm the right person, because what they need, or the zone of genius they need at that point, may necessarily not be me. You know what I mean? Or my zone of genius. So, if you're looking for a full digital marketing strategy and learn how to do Facebook ads, that's not me. But if you want to turn around and figure out your business plan and get your mindset in action and have a look at what the steps are you need to take with setting up a new business, that is me. You know what I mean? So just give me as much detail as possible. And that allows us then to connect on the Zoom really openly, to have a conversation. And I love people to think about it. It's like an interview. So interview me as much as I interview you, so we can ensure that it is the right relationship there, that the values align. Because that coaching consulting space is really one where so much personal, your personal side does come into play here. Yeah. Because you can block yourself because of stuff that's happening personally. So sometimes some of the questions are quite hard hitting, and you want to be really open in those sessions. So definitely come with the frame of mind that you want to give me as much information as possible so we can really connect. And as I said, interview me as much as I interview you in that 20-minute Zoom. Post your inquiry and we can see if we're the right ones to work together.
Kind of goes back to earlier in the point of the show about, a person cooking. If you put your love into your cooking, people will taste it. So I think part of that is transparency. As long as you're transparent about, yourself and what you're trying to accomplish, then I can only imagine the coaching sessions will be more of a compliment versus a dreadful experience. So with that said, what's the best call to action for people? Because obviously your book is coming out later this month. Once upon a startup. How can people find that book when it comes out?
Yep. So I'll actually, on daniellesady.com, it will be loaded in about 2 weeks for pre-orders. We will have the page up where people can start ordering now. It'll be in great bookstores, worldwide, chatting with my publisher. But the one thing I just want to highlight with the book, that is an option people can go down definitely to get some assistance, especially for those starting out, obviously, as the title says. But the point about the book was, when I wrote it, it's not just about reading it cover to cover either. I wanted it as an opportunity where if you're up to a certain phase, you can go to that chapter and I tell you about my experience with it, and that, kind of the why behind I'm writing that chapter, but I give you actionable steps. So you could literally build your whole business plan for a new business based upon the book, just from the action steps. You can read a chapter at a time, whatever. And then you've actually got questions to go back and ask those professionals that you want to chat to as well. So, it's can't wait for it to be out there and people to finally be reading it, because it was a beautiful 6 months for me to write it and really share that journey, so I can take some of that scariness and uncertainty away from people, and they don't have to learn some of the expensive lessons that I did. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Once again, been talking to Danielle Sady, business coach and consulting. Go visit her website, daniellesady.com. I want to say thanks again for talking to I'm Refocused Radio. Thank you for your time.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Have a fantastic rest of the day. Thank you.